And joining me now, Phyllis Bennis, director of the new Internationalism Project, the Institute for Policy Studies, author of Understanding ISIS, the New Global War on Terror, a primer. Brian Darling, former senior communications director for Senator Rand Paul, and MSNBC terrorism analyst. Malcolm Nance, author of The Plot to Hack America, How Putin's Cyber Spies and WikiLeaks Tried to Steal the 2016 Election. Brian, I want to start with you because a man that used to work for Rand Paul has a statement basically saying that this should be voted on by Congress. Mike Lee has basically said the thing, as has Barbara Lee in the House, a bunch of other individuals. And I'm seeing a lot of people who are in the kind of, let's say, paleo-conservative right, folks that were fans of Ron Paul, folks that allied themselves with the Trump campaign when he talked about not getting involved in Middle Eastern wars, when he came out very strongly against Syrian intervention in 2013, now feeling like they've been betrayed. What's your take on this?
I feel like I have, in a sense. I mean, I'm somebody who voted for Donald Trump for president, and I was voting for a guy who I thought had adopted in the campaign trail a foreign policy similar to Rand Paul's, a less interventionist foreign policy. He spoke out against nation building. He spoke out against President Obama's attempt to intervene in Syria back in 2013. He spoke out against Hillary's war in Libya. So this is somebody who talked against an interventionist foreign policy, but it appears what the American people may have is they may have gotten Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham's foreign policy, because what we're seeing right now is more interventionist. But the ultimate question, I guess, will be, is this a one-off? Is this something where President Trump has done this military strike and that will be the end of it, and he sent his message, or should we expect more?
Phyllis, you know, the folks on the left who I think I've seen in opposition to this, one of the points that the Syrian Americans that I've talked to and Syrian activists that I've sort of interacted with make the point that America has already been intervening for 2 years. The idea that tonight was the first time America bombed in Syria is just simply not true. We've been bombing ISIS in Syria for 2 years. We're now just bombing, and Syrians will say this, finally bombing the Assad regime.
Right. This is an ongoing reality for the U.S., that we are bombing in Syria. We're also bombing in half a dozen other countries. We're bombing in Iraq. We're bombing in Somalia. We're bombing in a number of places. And I think, but this does nonetheless represent a major escalation, and a very dangerous one. This is a direct attack on the Syrian state, where there are Russian troops involved. This is a major escalation in what has been a largely Cold War with Russia. It threatens to escalate that as well. You know, this is a situation where we just heard about expectations that the Trump administration was going to be more isolationist. The reality is that the isolationism does not include the military. This is a regime that has made clear now that it is as interventionist as any before it. It is isolationist when it comes to things like diplomacy and negotiations, not when it comes to the military.
That's a good distinction. We should also know that there have been, they have pushed, it appears, to loosen some of the rules of engagement. There have been empirically about 5 times as many drone strikes per day in terms of the rate as there were during the previous administration. So it has been one of escalation. Right. Malcolm, Phyllis made the point about the Russians there, and part of what I think has everyone so tense about this and the possibility for escalation is the presence of Iranians and Russians, and the idea of that kind of guns of August feel, that tripwire. There are all these reports that we basically told the Russians through the deconfliction channels we've been using to manage the war against ISIS this was happening. Is that sort of standard protocol?
Well, it's standard protocol now, since we do have this cooperative effort going on with the Russians in deconflicting aircraft and airstrikes throughout northern Syria. However, that being said, we have not been deconflicting with the government of Iran, or the Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces that are in Syria, the Assad regime, or Hezbollah, and Iraqi Shia militias who are all fighting inside of Syria. So we have one component by facilitating the Russian component of this. President Trump has made very clear that he thinks that Russia is the solution to this problem, but he decided to flex his muscles. However, this will actually facilitate the Iranians' belief that they have to get even more involved in order to stop the United States from carrying out its policies and, of course, completing the arc from southern Lebanon all the way to Tehran by supporting the Assad regime and defeating the rebels and ISIS.
Most of Congress has been heading home, but we have a bunch of congressional statements, and I want to talk about the domestic politics of this, because to me, it seems to matter where American voters are, where their representatives are in the Article I branch of the government that the Constitution gives the war-making powers to. So everyone stay with me.